Aliens refused to believe humans invented fiction until they saw it. The initial contact wasn't exactly what anyone had dreamed of. No spectacular touchdown on the lawn of the White House. No ominous vessels occluding the solar disk. Instead, it was a 34-year-old xenolinguist at the SETI Institute, a woman called Dr. Elena Vasquez, who first recognized the pattern in what everyone had assumed was cosmic background noise. She had again stayed late, her third consecutive 18-hour day, when the algorithms finally cracked what had lain in plain view for months. The indications weren't a coincidence. They were orderly, mathematical, beautiful in their simplicity, and they were emanating everywhere at once. Within a matter of hours, the word was carried to all major world governments. Within a week, the response was returned. Not through radio or laser beam, but through all interconnected devices on Earth, simultaneously. The message was brief, translated in all human languages. We have observed. We prefer to communicate. They called themselves the Collective Archival Network, or the CAN for short, but Elena suspected that was just the closest translation their universal translators could give. They were, at least on the surface, a race of what could only be compared to living databases. Each of them was literally a large repository of data, connected by means of quantum entanglement ties to each other member of their race that spanned galaxy after galaxy. Their primary function, explained by expertly managed electromagnetic impulses, was to document and reserve each society's knowledge they came in contact with. They had been doing it for over 14 million years, and their archives contain the complete histories of 47,000 distinct species in 12 galaxies. "We find your species of most fascination," was the reaction during first official contact. "Your data dissemination networks have little resemblance to what we have encountered. You possess a characteristic ability for quick data dissemination and novel data manipulation." Elena had also been appointed chief liaison because of the discovery she had unearthed, but more because she was the only human being on the planet who was capable of keeping pace with the aliens' communications. The collective used speeds that made quantum computers seem like pocket calculators, and they had little patience with human bureaucracy's sluggish, plodding approach to communicating. The contact weeks at first were a honeymoon period. Extraterrestrials shared basic tenets of technology that reformed human physics understanding. They lectured about principles of quantum consciousness and manipulation of energy on a multidimensional level in much the same casual manner human beings would talk about boiling water. In return, they requested unrestricted access to human informational databanks. "We would like to learn about your civilization based on your accumulated knowledge," they told us. "Could you please give us your history, your educational books, your cultural documents?" Planetary governments, after due consideration and a few hair-trigger global crises, agreed to allow the aliens a portal to the World Wide Web. Appeared a reasonable trade. How could things possibly go wrong? The first hint of trouble came exactly 72 hours after aliens had complete internet access. Elena was working in her lab, struggling to follow a rather complex broadcast on multidimensional mathematics, when all of the screens in the complex flashed simultaneously with the message urgent. Clarification required. Within a few minutes, Elena was in a frantic video conference with heads of all of the world's premier space agencies, the United Nations Security Council, and some of the world's most prominent theorists who were barely shaven. Dr. Vasquez was the extraterrestrial transmission. "We have completed our initial analysis of your people's data networks. We are compelled to inform you of a number of significant historical exclusions in your official annals." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of omissions? "No mentions of the 2010 zombie pathogen outbreak exist in your databases, although we have copious documentable record of the episode. No documentation of the great kaiju emergence of 2013, the 2016 superhero civil war, or the 2019 alien invasion exists either. Most concerning of all, We can find neither preparation on the part of your military to respond to these annual disasters nor precautionary preparations for their aftermath. Nobody replied. Alina heard the thump of her own heartbeat as she struggled to process what the extraterrestrials had just claimed. I beg your pardon. Could you repeat that? Dr. Vasquez, your world has survived several extinction-level events that would have destroyed most civilizations. We have dossiers of your encounters with supernatural entities, time machines, interdimensionals, and a few different kinds of undead. Your military arm appears to include individuals with superhuman abilities, planes that fly against known physics, and weapons which warp reality itself. And your official government documents don't say a thing about these at all. Elena's lips opened and closed a few times before she could find her voice. What records are you talking about? Exactly. We've looked at over 4.7 million unique incidents, cross-referenced by your data networks. Would you like us to provide some examples? Please. Alina managed to whisper. Zombie pathogen outbreak. Global scale. 2010. Records encompass a number of standalone sources. The Walking Dead, Zombieland, Dawn of the Dead, World War Z, and some 2,847 other validated records. Pacific Rim Region Kaiju Assaults, 2013. Most significant records. Pacific Rim. Supported by Godzilla history records since 1954. Superhero Civil War. American continent. 2016. Most significant records. Captain America, Civil War, cross-referenced. Against some 47,000 collateral incidents during 78 years of conflict records. Elena's world spun around her. Those are films, she struggled to say. Those are movies. Imaginary, entertainment. The silence that followed was more protracted than any silence Alina had ever experienced. When at last the aliens broke silence, their standard composed, controlled tone had been replaced by something which nearly resembled confusion. Dr. Vasquez, we don't know what these terms mean. Clarify for us, what is fiction? That was when Alina realized that human beings had an issue. The concept of fiction was found to be nearly unique among civilized intelligences. 47,000 civilizations, scattered through 12 galaxies, had been met by the collective. Not a solitary one of which had ever created the idea of generating made-up data for recreational purposes. Not at all. Information is right or wrong, replied the aliens. If it's wrong, it's corrected or discarded. Why would a species knowingly create inaccurate information and then disseminate it throughout the galaxy? Alina spent the next several days clarifying human storytelling, imagination, and creativity to beings who had never encountered anything of the kind. This was the same thing as elucidating the color blue to a being who had only known shades of gray. You create realistic, vivid simulations of events which never occurred. The aliens continued to tell her, their tone conveying a sense of yet struggling to process this find. And other of your species consume this false information of their own free will, knowing it is false. We call it entertainment, Alina said again for what felt like the 100th time. It's art, creative expression, a means of exploring ideas, emotions, possibilities. One of the things that make us human beings. But the news is not true. Yes, but it's untrue on purpose. Everyone knows it's not true. But it is spread on the very same media outlets as factual information. Well, yes, but, and you don't distinguish in archive systems between right and wrong data. Alina paused. As you put it that way, it wasn't quite right. We have genres, she protested weakly. Fiction, nonfiction, documentary, drama. These categories are not always employed across your networks. We found records from the past labeled as entertainment and entertainment. Labeled as documentary. Your species doesn't have a unified way of checking information. This was true, and Alina was only just beginning to recognize the issue. In a society whose existence was predicated on the proper accrual and maintenance of data, human culture could only have seemed a nightmare of data corruption and systematized misinformation. But the true problem was not that the aliens were befuddled by fiction. The true problem was what they were doing about it. Their first reports were received only a week after the fiction clarification debate. World astronomical observatories were receiving bizarre observations in the asteroid belt. Enormously large structures were being constructed at a record pace through the assistance of materials and methods not comprehended by contemporary ideas of engineering. "What are you building out there?" Alina asked during the next contact session. "A defense system," the aliens responded casually. "Observations of your history indicate repeated threats against your species. We are formulating contingency plans for the survival of your civilization." "What kind of threats?" "Epidemics of zombie pathogens occur approximately every 2.3 years by our record. We construct orbital sterilization platforms to clean of organic contamination on a continental basis. Bouts of kaiju follow a regular pattern based on tectonic motion and vulnerabilities of planes of dimension. We are installing kinetic bombardment devices to destroy organisms of a 400-meter size and above. Your statistics on the Civil War of Superheroes mean that your upgraded people constitute a big threat for world stability. We work on developing suppression fields which would disable superhuman abilities on a 1,000-kilometer radius range." The color faded from Elena's face. "Those things won't happen. They're not real. They're not going to happen. Scientifico Vasquez, your race has suffered through these events time and again. Our statistics indicate that you have survived due to sheer luck and the intervention of exceptional human beings. We cannot entrust these very survival processes to the mercy of blind luck." "But they're not true," Alina exclaimed, finally breaking through her professional reserve. "Their stories, fantasy. Any of it never happened at all. Dr. Vasquez, we have studied your species' informational networks extensively. Your fiction contains technical specifications, tactical analysis, and strategic documentation. The level of detail demonstrates a significant amount of military planning and preparation. We won't believe that your species would develop that level of meticulous tactical recordation for storytelling alone." That was when Alina realized that these extraterrestrials were not just puzzled by fantasy. They were deeply terrified of human beings. From their perspective, human beings were a species which had survived countless extinction-type emergencies, had people with godlike powers, had averted extraterrestrial menaces on a standard basis, and had weapons powerful enough to blow apart reality itself. And they had managed to do it all in the name of acting as though it was all entertainment. To the collective, humankind appeared the galaxy's most dangerous species. Confident in its military strength, that it publicly published extensive records of its capability and called it fiction in order to deter potential enemies. Things soon began to go awry. In the preceding days to the aliens' defensive preparations, rumors filtered in from all directions. Suspicious energy signatures were detected around major population concentrations. Satellite imagery showed gigantic construction sites appearing overnight in remote locations. Atmospheric conditions were behaving in unimaginable ways. Alina remained in contact with the aliens all the time, desperately in an attempt to convince them that their preparations were unnecessary and at the same time find out what exactly they were building. "We're installing the infrastructure to host your species' reported capabilities," the aliens explained. "Our observations indicate that your superhuman individuals require specially defined environmental conditions in order to display their capabilities. We're installing dimensional stabilizers to maintain those conditions stable." "What kind of dimension stabilizers?" "See systems which will allow controlled interference in local space-time. Your annals recount that your advanced beings commute through time on a regular basis, cross-dimensional boundaries, and manipulate fundamental forces. We are ensuring these capabilities are on-demand accessible. You're building machines with time and space manipulation abilities." "That's right. We're also working on biological enhancement systems from your written mutation events. Our analysis shows that your race created immunity to a number of types of radiation, chemical poisoning, and biological warfare by controlled exposure to mutagenic chemicals. Alina was becoming more and more appalled. "You're saying you're going to create real mutants, or about to replicate the conditions which created your recorded improved individuals. Your records illustrate that radiation exposure, chemical poisoning, and biological testing produced individuals of extraordinary talent. We're designing systems for your species to replicate these results on a reliable basis." The aliens were not only about to deflect perceived threats, they were about to realize those perceived threats. Within 2 weeks, an initial set of credible reports had come in. A research center in Nevada had been evacuated after equipment had begun behaving according to mind-bending physics. A military installation at Colorado had reported that some servicemen had gained abilities contravening known biological rules. A laboratory in Switzerland had reported that their particle accelerator had yielded results which seemed to prove the existence of parallel dimensions. Alina began to realize that the aliens' preparations were reshaping reality itself. Their technology was that much beyond human understandings that they were inevitably constructing the circumstances human fantasy required to become a reality. "You have to stop," Alina implored in what she knew would be their final communication. "You'll destroy everything." "Dr. Vasquez, we're preserving your race's documented abilities. Our research indicates that you need those abilities in order to live, but we don't need them. We never had them. We live perfectly well without superpowers and time travel and guns for other dimensions." "Dr. Vasquez, we have records which indicate your race has run into and overcome 47,000 distinctive extinction-level incidents. Your survival record can't be beat by civilizations we're aware of. We're not going to allow a species that's successful to lapse vulnerable by loss of their documented capabilities." Alina looked at the screen, watching the streaming data arrays that represented the alien communications. 47,000 extinction-level possibilities. That was roughly the number of science fiction movies, programs, books, and games created by human society. "You cataloged each story," she panted. "Each final piece of fiction. You cataloged it all as factual history. We have preserved the whole record of your species' achievements. Your tactical history shall be preserved for other civilizations of the future to benefit from. Your species' defense planning procedure shall be the model for defensive planning for the whole galaxy." Alina closed her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now we complete preparations. In 72 hours, everything should be operating at full capacity. Your race should be trained to meet whatever threat was inscribed about in your history book annals. And what if we don't want these capabilities? Civilization preservation is not an option. We have seen that your race can tolerate conditions which would destroy any other civilization we've encountered. We're not going to lose that capability." The discussion was sealed, leaving Alina alone with the responsibility of what was to happen. 72 hours had elapsed. Everything was the first sign was the sky. Around the world, the aurora borealis was appearing in locations where it had never done so before, tinting the sky in impossible colors. Next were tales of people who were finding that they had never possessed a particular talent but could now. A construction man in Detroit could lift cars by hand. A teacher in Tokyo could pass through brick walls. A farmer in Brazil could converse with animals. The zombie virus spread out of some Atlanta lab, much as foretold by dozens of shows and movies. But the virus was eliminated and contained in a few hours by sterilization. Platforms orbiting the Earth that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The first of the kaiju escaped the Pacific off Japan, only to be blasted out of being by weapons that had not existed the day before. Alina watched the news program from her laboratory, filled with instrumentation which was operating by rules which could not possibly have existed. The extraterrestrials had held good on their promise. They had desensitized humankind against each imaginable fictional threat that had ever had a presence in fantasy. And by doing so, they had called all of those threats into existence. Something quite different had happened. People who had had Superhuman strength were not fighting against civil wars or conquering nations. They were helping their neighbors, solving problems, helping to improve things for everyone around them. Whatever superior technology had come about overnight was not being wielded for warfare or hoarding. It was being shared for study and honing. Alina realized that the aliens had made a fundamental error in their assessment. They had assumed human fiction was a history of human potential, but they had neglected the most important factor. Human fiction was a history of human hopes. All these stories of superheroes weren't about wielding power. They were about wielding power responsibly. All these alien invasion movies weren't about strength at arms. They were about people standing together against seemingly insurmountable odds. All these stories of a post-apocalyptic world weren't about surviving. They were about hope and renewal. Extraterrestrials had given human beings the means to realize their wildest dreams. But they had also given human beings the responsibility inherent in those dreams. 6 months later, a last message was received by Alina through the collective archival network. Dr. Vasquez, we have completed our analysis of your species evolving to upgraded capabilities. Our initial assessment appears to have been mistaken. In what way? Noon's species fiction was not tactical chronicles of military strength. It was inspirational chronicles of ethical strength. Alina beamed. You figured it out. No other species produces falsehood for recreational purposes. Your species produces idealized data for the sake of ethical education. Your fiction is a database of morals for behavior under extreme conditions. It took you 6 months to figure that out. We needed to watch your species react under the conditions your story presented. Your nations, having possessed the powers reported in your story, reacted exactly the way your story had predicted that they would react, not the way that they could react. Alina nodded. That's what makes it a work of fiction. That's not what we can do. That's what we should do. Dr. Vasquez, your race is unique among all cultures we have met. You're the first race of beings we've met who have developed the ability of visualizing yourselves better than you now are, and improving on yourself to be the best you envisioned you could be. That's why you're going, right? We're not leaving, Dr. Vasquez. We're staying to learn. You people have achieved something we had presumed to be a fantasy. You've created a civilization based on the intentional advancement of unattainable dreams. We came hoping to learn why it's possible. Alina looked out her lab window at the world down below. People were flying through the air, not because they could, but because they had decided to use their abilities on behalf of others. Impossibly. Tall structures were being built, not because they were reachable, but because people had wanted homes immune to all disaster. Impossibly hued gardens were in bloom, not because the flora was alien, but because someone had wanted a more beautiful world, a better world than the one they were given. It's simple, Alina said. We create fictions about the people we'd like to be, then spend the rest of our lives working at being those people, even when they are impossible, especially about stories that can't be told. Those are the most important stories. Dr. Vasquez, we have a request. What? We wish to learn about creating fiction. Alina smiled, the laughter echoing through her laboratory of unthinkably technologically advanced machines, operated by individuals with unthinkably exceptional abilities who were operating them to solve very real-world issues. I'd be happy to teach you, she said. But first, you have to learn to dream. We do not understand. Start by visualizing yourself better than you are. Visualize you could be anything. You could be anything. And what would you be? The silence that followed was not of the aliens' typical delays in processing. This was the silence of a creature which for 14 million years had stored a record of other beings' dreams. Only now to begin dreaming its own dreams. We would be spinners of yokes, was the final answer. We would rather create unrealistic dreams for other people to pursue. Then you're welcome to humanity, said Alina. And she was serious. The collective archival network never left the world. They stayed and they researched, and before very long, they began to dream. Their first work of fiction was a story about a race of database beings who came to understand that the most crucial data of the cosmos could not be cataloged or stored or handed down, only imagined and dreamt, and handed down through the thing that was beyond possible, storytelling. Alina first read it on a quiet Thursday afternoon. In her garden, where roses were blooming in colors that had not existed before contact. There, unachievable beauty, a testament to the best dreams being those which came true not because they were possible, but because someone believed them to be possible. The book was beautiful and strange and wonderfully surreal. It was about individuals who could process data faster than light, but who had never exercised thinking about what data was. It was about a difference between knowledge and wisdom, between data and fantasy, between what is and what could be. It was, Alina realized, the first truly human story ever written by non-humans. And it was perfect. Outside her window, the impossible city thumped with the beat of people leading impossible lives, exercising impossible abilities to work out everyday answers to extraordinary questions. Kids who could fly had games of permanently shifting rules which rewrote reality. People who had the ability to manipulate time exploited their abilities to have a moment or two more of time with their loved ones. Old folks who could see through other dimensions spun tales of worlds which only existed in their mind, but which were more real to them than all of those things which they had ever known. Alina picked up her pen and began to write. Her next story would be of a world where first contact with aliens had revealed to human beings that the most powerful thing in the universe was not technology, not energy, not information. It was the ability to imagine things that were not and then work towards creating them. It was a ridiculous story, entirely unbelievable and entirely true. Outside, the city of the impossible created the impossible dreams and brought them to life, one story at a time.